All right, I think we're ready to go. Good evening, everyone. Today is Thursday, February 4th. This is the Litchfield Elementary School District Governing Board study session. I officially call this session to order. We're going to jump right into our budget planning discussion for fiscal year 21-22. And I believe Wendy Qualls is going to lead us through that. Oh, I'm sorry, it looks like Wendy, Jody, and Megan might be leading us through that. So a trio of presenters. My apologies.
Wendy, would you like me to start?
Yes.
Okay. Madam President, members of the governing board, welcome this evening. We wanted to jump in and really just dive into our budget study session. So there will be 3 of us presenting to you this evening. Next slide. And this links directly to our strategic plan in increasing stakeholder knowledge and understanding on school funding. So this is something that we wanted to be able to provide some background knowledge, give some insight and some information, definitely elaborate a little bit about how student enrollment impacts our budget and the effects that it has, as well as the possible supports that we might receive from the federal government, as well as kind of going over the supports that we have already received. Next slide. And then our timeline of what we're looking at. Oh, wait, sorry. I think I skipped a slide. Go back one. Oh, nope, that was right. Okay. Perfect. Sorry, I thought I saw something different. So our timeline is we'll have an additional study session on February 23rd. We'll bring to you our health insurance plans, premiums, and current insurance policies that we have in place, teacher contract language for you to review, substitute teacher pay rates. And then March 2nd, we have a special meeting where we will review our reduction in force policy and procedures, approve some staffing numbers, class sizes, including our DLA class sizes, and approve the contract language. And then March 16th meeting will approve insurance plans and the issuance of our teacher contracts.
Okay, so next we are going to discuss how student enrollment impacts the budget. So student enrollment is a component of Arizona School District funding formulas. The funding formula for Maintenance and Operation Fund is based on current year enrollment. The funding formulas for the M&O Override, Capital Outlay, Classroom Site Fund, and Instructional Improvement Fund are all based on prior year enrollment. Next slide, please. This table illustrates how the decline in student enrollment impacts components of the M&O budget. For the 2019-2020 school year, there were 10,879 students. Group A weight factor is based on the total number of students in a school district. For example, a district with 500 students has a higher weight than a district with over 600 students. Group B weight is based on the number of high-cost students, such as English language learners and special education students. The total weighted student count of 14,628 is multiplied by the state-determined base level amount per student to determine our base level amount. When the M&O budget was adopted in July of 2020, the projected number of students was 10,662, a decrease of 217 students. The weighted student count was 14,294. When multiplied by the state-determined base level amount, it was $62 million. As of January 20, 2021, the student count was 9,882, a decrease of 780 students from the projected number. The group A and B weights were also lower than projected, resulting in a base level of $58 million. For the 21-22 school year, The projected number of students is estimated by subtracting the 8th graders and adding an estimate for the kindergarten students. The projected count is 9,405, a decline of 477. The funding amount per student has not been released by the state. Therefore, the funding level is presented equal to the current year, and the base level is $55 million. The M&O override formula is based on prior year student count, including the Group A and Group B weights, times the state funding amount per student. The override calculation includes the transportation support level and reimbursement for our financial audit fee. The M&O override amount for the 2019-2020 school year was $9.4 million. The amount for the 2021 school year is just under $10 million. This amount did not change in the current year since the calculation is based on prior year students. The 21-22 illustration, the funding amount per student has not been released by the state, therefore the funding amount is equal to the current year. The 2021-2022 M&O override amount is $9.1 million. Next slide, please. In summary, when these two components are added together, the 2019-2020 amount was $70.9 million. The estimated 2021 year was $72.3 million. The staff and pay increases for the 2020-2021 school year were determined based on an increase in the budget of $1.4 million. With the decline in student enrollment this year and the reduction in funding for operating in distance learning mode, these budget components equal $65.2 million. The district received the Educational Stabilization Grant to assist with the decrease in student enrollment. However, even with this grant, these budget components decreased by $0.8 million rather than the expected increase of 1.4. The illustrated amount for 21-22 is $63.9 million. This is $8.4 million lower than the amount at the beginning of the 2021 school year. Next slide, please. This table illustrates how the decline in student enrollment impacts other budgets, which are based on prior year enrollment. The capital outlay budget is utilized to purchase furniture, equipment, vehicles, library books, textbooks, and instructional materials. For 2020-2021, the amount of the funding per student in capital outlay was $379. When multiplied by the prior year student count, including Group A weight, the total is 4.1 million. For 21-22, the funding level for capital outlay is expected to be fully restored. The estimated capital outlay fund is $4.5 million. The instructional improvement budget is utilized for classroom teacher pay and professional development. The enrollment decline results in a $40,000 decline. The funding amount per student is an estimate in both years. The funding is based on casino revenues, and the actual amount is not known until the following budget year. The amount will most likely decline due to the pandemic. The classroom site fund budget utilized for classroom teacher base and performance pay and for intervention aid salaries. The enrollment decline results in a $500,000 decline. The funding amount per student has not been released by the state for 21-22. Therefore, it's presented equal to the current year amount. This amount also will most likely decline due to the pandemic. Next slide, please. Superintendent Gunning.
Thank you, Wendy. So we wanted to also share with you some of our marketing ideas and strategies that we're putting into place this year in hopes to recruit or bring back some of our students. So our hashtag is "There's no place like LESD." Our principals and their staff have been reaching out and contacting families who have withdrawn during the pandemic that we believe still live in our area. Just doing a well check, checking in to see also if there's anything that they need or anything that we can assist with. So they're going to be doing this over a period of time. So the communication will happen via personal phone calls. We are also working on mailers that will go out to the entire community area of our district, along with emails and social media, when we know that we are officially reopening for in-person learning, so that all families will know, and that they'll know that they can take their next steps to re-register, and also really encouraging them to register for next year. We're working also with the community developers to ensure that they have accurate information for our families when they're purchasing our new homes in that western area, as well as there's a couple on the east side as well. Next slide.
So knowing all of that, what we just learned from Miss Wendy, we had to really think about developing a systematic way to make some decisions based on our current budget. We have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So that is what we started. We started this process by creating a restructuring team. This started at the administrative level so we could get big picture. And those administrators that that joined this team were a good representation of Title I and non-title, elementary and middle K-8s. And then we also had a ed services director and a business director to ensure we got a good group to begin this process. Go ahead and next slide, please. So what this team's purpose was, it was a first step in really providing innovative staffing models and suggestions that align with our strategic plan with consideration of school size. This team also was tasked at considering models that allow for the continuance of excellent educational programming and providing innovative options to reduce operational costs with minimal to no impact on student success. So what this team did was we looked at, the first thing we did was we got together and with the superintendent cabinet, and we really looked at our strategic plan, and we worked through each pillar, and we said, what are we doing that are helping, what things are we doing that help us be the very best at Litchfield? And we listed all those. We spent a lot of time on that because the purpose of that was, what we want to do is, knowing that we have to create a plan with a smaller budget, we still have to ensure to bring the Litchfield way through, to not lose that. So we have to keep our eye on those things while becoming innovative at restructuring. So that was what we were tasked with. It was a big task, but because this team was just the very first step, we're going to get everyone involved in this process, from every staff member and come back to admin and come back to our school families, everyone involved in this. This was just the very first step. So that's why it wasn't so overwhelming, because we know we have some amazing people and roles and that we're going to include in this in our next steps. Go ahead, Stevie, the next slide, please. And so that timeline for that team and the process was on January 12th, we met with the restructuring team. And then the week of January 18th, they went back to their administrative cohorts with K5, 6, 8, and then our directors, and they work through that same process. So those members of our restructuring team were then the leads for their administrators, and they walked through same thing, identifying our strategic plan and what makes us who we are, so we don't lose sight of that. Now, knowing that we have this budget shortfall, what do we need to plan for? And so then January 28th, they met with our cabinet and reviewed all those ideas that the team came up with. And then February 9th, we'll bring a summary of those ideas to our administrative council so that we can begin brainstorming and getting the next layer of people involved as well. And then the week of February 15th, we'll be surveying all our employees to get their input, because they're critical. We need to have them kind of just share like what's important, what are our nice to have, what are our must haves, knowing the reality of our new budget. And then we'll develop some parent communication as well. And then we'll bring all that back to you all at our March 2nd special meeting and present our ideas and some things that we believe we would like the board to consider while we're in order to determine staffing needs for next year.
Thank you, Mrs. Duplain. So the next item is the governor's budget. So the governor did put out his budget for next year. The state and House are also putting out their own budgets, and then negotiations will begin. The governor's budget does include grant funding for districts if they apply to provide remediation supports for students that qualify for free and reduced lunches. That's by offering summer school. His budget also includes funding for parents to provide transportation solution grants. So that would allow parents to transport their students to the school of their choice. His plan also has open for all enrollment, which implements new statewide requirements for the open enrollment process. He wants to outline timelines for the length of time that open enrollment is open and make it more consistent district to district. Requires dyslexia screening for all K-3 students. Also, for any new certified elementary teachers, they would need to pass the foundation of reading evaluation. And his budget did include an estimated inflation factor of 1.22%. His budget also does include that inflation amount, but based on proposition passed by the voters, they do not have to give us that inflation factor. So that it will be optional when they negotiate whether or not we actually receive the inflation factor. Next slide, please. So on December 27th of 2020, the federal government enacted the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations. The first appropriation they made was considered the SR1 funds, and those were distributed to the states and then to the schools based on Title I allocations. These SR2 funds are going to be distributed on the same allocation method. So I estimate that we'll receive $3 million from this new SR2 fund. The term goes back to March 13th of 2020 and goes through September 30th of 2022. So we still will have the option to use these funds for the current year or to carry them into the next school year. The funds will remain available through September 30th of 2023. Next slide, please. The allowable uses include expenditures due to COVID-19, address the learning loss among students, also to make repairs and improvements to our campuses to make sure they're safe to reopen and operate. It includes also authorization to use it to repair or replace any of your equipment to improve the indoor air quality in the school facilities. Next slide, please. President Biden signed an executive order on reopening and continuing operation of schools on January 21st of 2021. So he's directed the Secretary of Education to work with the Department of Health and Human Services to provide school districts with a reopening and a remaining open plan for in-person learning. So districts must ensure the funds are used not only to reopen schools, but also to meet the academic, mental health, and social needs of the students. His executive order also reauthorized FEMA to reimburse school districts for COVID-related expenses and also to support and implement a regular testing protocol. So in the guidelines that we receive, we are anticipating specific information on testing that will be required. His order also provides emergency expanded paid sick leave for families. I have not seen any additional information on this to know if it is retro, how many days. So we're still awaiting guidance on that. Next slide, please. So to support his presidential executive order, his budget proposal in the stimulus plan is $130 billion for K-12 schools. And his plan lays out a few different options. It's to reduce class size, improve ventilation, hire more janitors, provide personal protective equipment, ensure the school has access to a nurse, increase transportation capacity, hire counselors, also to close the digital divide, and also other supports that would be needed, such as summer school, and also to create and expand community schools and other costs that would be needed just to safely reopen and support students. So this again is his proposal. The federal House and Senate are negotiating this as we speak. And so hopefully in the next week or so, we'd have at least information on what they're going to approve. We'll still need to wait to see how it will be distributed to the states and then what method the state uses to allocate it. So at this point, we have no idea how much we'd receive from this. Proposition 208, I just wanted to give a quick little update on that. The voters approved Proposition 208, November 3rd of 2020. That's the 3.5% income tax surcharge on taxable income above $250,000 for a single filer and $500,000 for joints. The proposition did specify how the funds were to be used. 50% is to hire and increase the base compensation for teachers, classroom support personnel, which included in that is librarians, nurses, counselors, social workers, speech pathologists, behavior coaches, psychologists, and similar positions. 25% was to be used to hire and increase base compensation, excuse me, for support service personnel.
Miss Wendy, do you need water?
So.
It's all right. You're fine, Wendy. Take a minute. We got time.
Sorry, just got a dry throat. So it includes classroom aides, media specialists, health assistants, security guards, also food service, clerical staff, transportation, and site plant operations. 10% could be used for mentoring and retention programs to be developed by the State Board of Education. Next slide, please.
Wendy, I can jump in.
I think I'm better.
Think you're better? Okay.
I think so Proposition 208 will be distributed to the school districts on June 30th and December 31st. Most likely, we'll begin to see the majority of the funds available in July of 22. It's going to be distributed based on weighted student count. Currently, there are at least 2 lawsuits challenging the validity of this. So that may also delay the implementation.
And Wendy, can I just ask a really quick question about that? Because you think the funds would be available in July of 2022, that really mean that our school year is already done for that. So that would really mean fiscal year of 23 that we would really see any budget impact for us or funds that we'd be able to use. Is that correct?
They are still working on how they're going to distribute these or estimate them. they're thinking they may be able to estimate in July or June of 22 the amount that would be available. So we would have some available for the 22-23 year. But it'll depend on the lawsuits.
Sure. Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Next slide, please.
All right. That was a lot of information, obviously, for all of us. I'm sure we have questions and things like that. We can start. I'll open the floor to board members or anyone that would like to ask questions. And then Stevie, I would just ask if you could go back to the point in the presentation if they do have a question about something specific, so that we could, you know, kind of all be on the same page. But
yeah, I can make that happen.
okay, thank you. Well, I'll let you know. I have it here too, so I can tell you which slide it is. But I will open the floor now if we want to go back to, you know, any of the specific numbers and ask questions about that and start there and go forward, or however you want to do it. So I'll open the floor. Anyone want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first.
Okay.
First of all, thank you for that presentation. That was very good information. And as Danielle said, a lot of information. So I will start with my first question is on slide 5. I understand that it is impossible to predict, but when you look at this 2021, 2022 estimate, and we say that we're subtracting the 8th graders, but adding in an estimate for kinder, I'm assuming it's safe to say this is a worst case scenario. I know right now, from what I've read, there is this population of lost kindergartners who have not even enrolled this year. So would we expect our first grade in the coming school year to be higher? Have we built that in at all? Or are we really saying our kinders will become our first graders, no additional enrollment, and our kinder next year will be the same that our kinder is this year?
So that illustration is based on next year's kindergartners being the same as this year. It does not include any estimate for those that, whether they're being homeschooled this year for kindergarten. So it does not include an increase for those students.
Okay. Okay. And like I said, I understand that it's impossible to predict what that number would be. However, I would imagine our first grade would expand. We get some kids back there, and that our kinder hopefully would expand as well. So that's just kind of a side note in that. My next question is on the next slide, slide 6. So Wendy, will you tell me, when I'm looking at the $826,000 decrease in funding, is that total, meaning what's the actual hit to potentially our rainy day fund? Do I need to look at the 1.4 million decrease in that we had planned for that we didn't get, plus the 827,000 to be like 2.2 million? Or tell me a little bit more about that.
Stevie, go one more slide, please.
Yeah, one more slide, please.
Thank you.
So these are just the components. It doesn't include carryover or anything like that. I was just trying to show the impact of student enrollment. So the 826,000 loss is the difference between the 2021 that we had planned at 72.3 million compared to the 65 million plus the stabilization. So when you're comparing what we planned for 2021 versus what we actually, where we are for 2021, it's a decrease of 826,000.
Okay, okay, so I don't need to consider that 1.4 million in addition to the 826. We're just looking at 826.
Well, we were planning to be up by 1.4 million. We're down by 826. So it'd be 2.2 million about difference.
Okay, so it is those two numbers added together.
Yes.
Okay. And so that shortfall is coming from, I mean, is that actually going to be our shortfall for 2020, 2021? Do we expect a $2.2 million dip into our rainy day fund, or where do we think that number is going to land?
So that information we'll have for you next month, but it would not be because we have not filled positions. So remember, we were planning and staffing for that 72 million, but we didn't fill positions and have had other savings throughout the year. So I wouldn't expect that we would have that large of an impact on the rainy day.
Okay. On this question would be for Megan. Megan, on slide number 11, when we talk about the restructuring team timeline, can you share some of those ideas with us? And the reason I'm asking for some information now is because in the past, the district and the committees and all that have gone and done their work and came back to us with ideas. And sometimes those ideas are things that the board might say, that's off the table. That's not a negotiable one for us. So I think it might be a good idea if we could maybe see some initial ideas before we do the surveys. And I don't know if you want to talk about that tonight or at a different time, but that seems like these timelines are coming up here pretty quick. What do you think about that?
Yes, so I'll ask Superintendent Gunning, we are going to meet as a cabinet to review further what the restructuring team has. We started their recommendations. We did that initially, and we need another time to do it so that we can get a good kind of go through, because there are some things as well that people will come up with that we don't agree with it being the best option as well. So we need to go through that as well. I'm wondering if maybe we could do that in a Friday update after we look at it, or Superintendent Gunning, what would you recommend on that?
I think that's a good idea. And I'm anticipating that you'll probably get still kind of a longer list, so to speak, and then you'll just know what maybe the feedback from the survey is on what some priorities are. And there may very well be some that others prioritize and you may say, no, that's off the table. And we would definitely expect that. So, I mean, like giving an example, maybe watering in the front grass areas or things like that. Like they're brainstorming from every department to every school site too.
Mm-hmm. I guess I would just rather, and that sounds like a great plan, I think, to get some feedback from a Friday update. I would just rather, if we know from a leadership perspective, whether it's board perspective or kind of admin council, if we know there's some things that really are non-negotiables, I'd rather not put that as an option in the survey, because then we have that you ask me for feedback on this, but then you're not taking my feedback. So I'd rather ask for things that we really put in their hands to be able to decide about, rather than and there may not even be anything. I just am thinking based on history, there could be something that when we look at the strategic plan looks different from when the principals or teachers might look at the strategic plan goals.
I think those are really good thoughts. So we will meet as a cabinet again and get that list to you and get it to you in a Friday update. I'm looking at thinking.
We also, Megan, we also have a study session on the 23rd of February. So putting it in, I mean, it seems like that timeline with a Friday update, and then it seems like there might just be a week difference in there. So that might be a possibility too, if you did the Friday update initially, we came back together. I don't know the exact agenda. I'm not looking at that right now, but we already have that time allocated on the calendar. So you might be able to use that as well and just piggyback onto that agenda if that works.
And then maybe sending out the staff survey right after.
Yeah, I don't know if it works with the timeline of the survey, but feel free to use that if we want to just add to that piece of the agenda.
That's a good idea. All of that are good ideas for sure. We'll do that. So we'll plan on doing a Friday update, and then we'll add that to that agenda to discuss on further those options.
Thank you. I have two additional questions. My next question is on this is for Wendy, on the SR1 and SR2 funds, are those built into the slides? And I'm sorry, I should have asked this earlier, I suppose, but when we look at the education stabilization grant, the 4.8 million, that's just the SR1, is that correct?
Yes.
Or is
that's
that different?
correct. That's SR1.
Okay. Okay, so SR2,
Oh, sorry. No, that's the stabilization grant. The one that's on the slide is stabilization grant. So the SR1 was not in the presentation. So it was around 740,000.
okay.
So I
And you
anticipate-
estimate SR,
I
Go ahead, sorry.
estimate SR2 to be $3 million.
the 3 million. Okay, so the 3 million, we may be able to help with our 2021-22 budget.
Yes.
Okay. My last question is on Prop 208, there's 15% that's not defined in this 50, because you said 50%, 25%, 10%. That leaves us with 15%. Is that just undefined? We can use it for any of those categories or some wiggle room there?
So the 15% would be state level programs. So
Okay. So we're only getting this remaining amount, this 85%.
right.
Okay. That's all my questions.
Okay, can I follow up just really quickly on the ESSER funds, just because we were just talking about that and going back to that. So we have the ESSER1 funds at 700,000. We've already received those. ESSER2, we're expecting them to be around 3 million. We have not received those yet. Is that correct, Wendy?
Yes, that's correct.
What is the likelihood that we will receive that full $3 million? Just what's your guesstimate on that?
So based on what we know so far about the total amount that's coming to the state of Arizona and how they're going to allocate it, that amount is the estimate.
Okay, and this is this part of, I just want to make sure I'm totally understanding, is this a part of or separate from the executive order signed by President Biden that's allocating the 130 billion or whatever for that? Is this part of that, or this is sole and separate? So that other funding would be on top of the SR2 funds.
So SR2 was what President Trump approved at the end of December. So that one is approved, and the State Department should let us know sometime this month the actual amount that we would be able to apply for. And then President Biden's plan is what they're still negotiating at the federal level right now.
Okay, so on top of, okay, I just wanted to make sure. I didn't know if those were sort of overlapping or whatever. So they're separate. Okay, so because the SR1 funds are not in this document right here, where does that fall? I know there were obviously specific criteria that we could use those funds for. How much of that have we spent, and where does that fit into this overall budget?
So that fund, we've spent over 500,000, and it's all things that have been in addition to and specific for COVID. So it's been paying the family first time off that folks have had, or PP&E supplies, the disinfecting at the school sites, additional custodial staff. So it's all been at costs that have been in addition to our normal budget.
Okay. I understand. Thank you. Are there any, I saw the governor's budget and kind of going through that. I know we don't know, since our state legislators haven't negotiated that budget with the governor yet. But, you know, for example, the open for all enrollment, some additional programs that he's looking for. Do you think those come with any price tag? Or meaning like, kind of like an unfunded mandate, we're going to have to do additional guidelines and things like that, but we're not going to receive funding for it? Or is it just going to be something, just pure guidelines that we have to follow, but not programs we have to enact?
So as far as open enrollment, my understanding is it's just going to be procedures, trying to establish a statewide procedure that we'll need to follow. Not that it will increase our costs, it's just we may have to modify our timelines.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. Melissa, Jeremy, questions for Wendy or anyone else?
I guess I have a question, is that what happens when there's a shortfall? Is it like you can't write checks, or is that what the rainy day fund is for, or how do you juggle the books and make things work, Wendy?
So the maintenance and operation budget is our largest budget, and it is budget based. So once we've set the budget, we can spend up to that budget amount. We have several other funds that are cash based that we can use to cover some M&O costs if we exceed our budget.
Okay, I think I get that. So there's a little flexibility. You can just not spend as much on some of those things, maybe. Huh?
Yes.
Melissa, did you have any additional questions?
I think my only question is, and I probably should have emailed you this before, Wendy, but remind me again, where are we at on our rainy day fund? Because we know that we are going to have a loss this year potentially, although we are expecting more funds from the SR2 funds to come in, which will hopefully help with some of that. Can you tell us where we're at with that?
So I estimated that back in December, and I want to update that again before I give you an exact number, but I believe with the cuts that we've made during this year, or the not filling positions and everything, I think we're going to break pretty much even. We may be using some of the additional carryover, but not necessarily the rainy day money. But I'll have that for you next month.
Were those savings because of just normal attrition of people leaving and things like that?
There was some attrition savings, but the majority came from not filling the position. So once we were closed, and we didn't hire some of the classified employees.
Got it.
And then just also savings with not hiring as many substitutes. Operational costs were down, not paying as much for, not paying for much or as much, purchasing as much paper supplies, school
Right.
supplies, just overall operational costs were down a little.
Okay.
Okay. Great. Are we ready to move on? No more questions or comments. Remember, just for everybody, this is the first of many times we will see this budget and priority list and funding sources over the next couple of months. So, you can go back and look at that timeline. Thank you guys for putting that in. It kind of keeps track of where we're going to be over the next 4 to 6 weeks with some really important milestones. So we will move on to discussion of performance pay plan and the 301 compensation. Wendy, I think that's you as well, along with Gina.
So Stevie, if you could please put up the presentation.
Sorry, I'm working on it.
Next slide, please. So tonight, myself and Gina DeCoste will be presenting the information on performance pay plans. Next slide, please. So we're going to be talking about the history of performance plans. It's very confusing how our plans have developed over the years. So tonight we're going to increase our knowledge of the overall history and the performance pay plans. Next slide, please. So the Arizona Career Ladder Program began in 1985, It was a state program and it provided additional funding for teacher performance compensation. It was up to an increase of 5.5% on the funding level per student, and it was funded by the state along with local taxes. Performance awards and performance-based pay increases began over 30 years ago in the Litchfield School District for all employees. Mrs. Roby was a big advocate for performance pay. We're one of the first in the state to have a program, along with local taxes. Performance awards and performance-based pay increases began over. The classified employees performance awards ended in 2005. In 2005, we underwent a performance audit by the Auditor General, and they did not like at all that we did performance pay for classified employees. They considered it a gift of public funds. So we stopped performance awards in 2005. In November of 2000, the voters approved Proposition 301. And you can refer back to the September 8th, 2020 board meeting for a detailed presentation on 301. In 2011 to 2015, the career ladder funding was phased out. So most districts stopped doing their career ladder program in 2015. Next slide, please. So our performance compensation program utilizes our evaluations for the current year. And the evaluation not only determines the current performance award amount at the end of the year, but it also determines the next year base increase for teachers, coaches, assessment staff, and administrators. The next year base increase is for our supervisors and hourly employees. They do not receive awards at the end of the year, but their following year compensation is based on their evaluation. Next slide, please. So there's various documents where you'll see information on the performance awards. The first place is on our salary placement charts. So normally in March, early April, you'll see a placement chart. And the placement chart has information regarding the base pay, performance awards, and the benefits. And it's all in one place for current employees and prospective employees. The next document you'll approve is the Career Development and Performance Compensation Plan. And that has the details of the program and the performance measures for certified teachers. The next document is Performance Award Plan. It's all awards in one document. So that's administrator awards, assessment staff, teachers. And that was requested by the Auditor General's department while they did our performance audit back in 2005. So that was their request, that people could go one place and see the entire package of the awards. Another requirement is the Consolidated 301 plan. That is a summary of the funding and also the compensation amounts. So between these four documents, you see the same information over and over, but the purpose of each document, each document has its own purpose. So one is meant for the prospective employee, one is meant just for the detail for the teachers to have a detailed plan, and then also to have the awards in one place. So I hope that helps a little bit understand why you see so many different documents with the same information.
Okay, so then we have the 301 performance awards that you probably remember approving, modifying and approving. We had some great discussions about these in the fall. And each one of these awards is about $1,333. So if they meet all three goals, their award would be $4,000.
The first one is professional development, which this year we changed from attendance to professional development. We discussed that at our meeting, and I just wanted to give you guys an update as I did a random sampling of teachers who had turned in their PD benchmarks because they were due in January. They're anywhere between 15 and 37 hours because you had asked that I track that, thinking that 15 may be too low. So we're just keeping an eye on that and considering what we'll do for next year, if we'll make that a higher benchmark or not. The second performance award is professionalism. And really that is part of the evaluation. So if they receive a letter of reprimand or greater discipline, it's an ineffective on standard 5 of their evaluation, and they would lose that goal or that portion of the 301 money. And when we say standard 5, I was thinking tonight that I should have put this in there on the teacher evaluation system. There are 5 standards. So number 1 is planning for instruction. Number 2 is instruction. The third one is learning climate. The fourth one is assessment. And the fifth one is that professionalism piece. Next slide, please. And then the third award that they're eligible for is the student growth component, which again, we modified due to COVID. We modified it last year and we're modifying it again. So what you see under student growth during a typical year is what we normally do. And I put samples in because I remember talking at the last meeting saying it might be helpful for you to see how we're actually calculating that. So that'll be in the next couple of slides, explaining how they get the points, that up to the 38 points for that. So then that goes into standard 6, which isn't part of their actual observation when principals are going in and observing them. This comes later for the performance award piece. Now, during COVID, again, we're going to use the school-wide growth because that's the best data that we have. Same thing as last year with the uncertainty of when we're taking assessments. Okay, so next slide, please. So this, I gave you some examples of different student growth rubrics that we use. This would be the K1 rubric. So when it says an 80-20 float weight here on the side by the 6.1, that's the standard 6.1 and 6.2. It's one of these is worth 29 points and one is worth 7. And then their school label also counts into their points. So once all of their data is calculated, if their growth coefficient is between 0.95 or greater, which we expect our level 3 teachers to be at, then they get all of their points. So you have your own results, which are weighted a little bit heavier, and then the grade level results are the 20% float weight. So that kind of makes it fair to teachers, but it also gives that they're all our kids concept too, you know, like really want my kids to do well, but we all want all of our kids to do well. Next slide, please. And this is an example of a 2nd through 5th grade rubric. And you can see here, it's they have a little, their points are broken up differently because they have their teacher results in reading and math, and then their grade level results in reading and math. And you can see here, I picked a C school for you, so they don't get points for a C school. Next slide, please. And then this is just an example of middle school or K8 PE. They all vary a little bit, like a lot of work goes into this. And when you have the career development performance plan for approval, all of this is in there in detail for every teacher in the district. There are a lot of rubrics because we try to make sure that everybody has something to have some data to focus on student growth with. So and this is at the bottom of at the end of the evaluation, and this kind of sums up a little bit of it for you. I just wanted you to have a picture. So obviously we changed attendance. So this is from last year. Nobody's completed their evaluations yet because they're not due till May. So they'll check whether they met their attendance goal, their professionalism goal, and their standard and their growth goal. And then all of the points are added up. And then that's where we get this highly effective, developing, and ineffective. Remember, we have that report that comes to you that we have to report to the state. And we have a lot of highly effective teachers. And so we had some conversation about that too at one of our board meetings.
So that's an example of how the points are calculated. And then this is the career development piece. And this is why Wendy was saying like it's very complicated because we just did the 301 piece. So the career development is more like what used to be career ladder that the state took away, that now the district funds through M&O, just to continue to offer that program to teachers. And that's kind of why we have a complicated system, because we've kept that career development / you'll hear a lot of teachers still say career ladder piece in there, and there are a lot of requirements in there. So our level 3 teachers, so the levels there, it's level 1, level 2. So level 1 would be someone who's first year in our district. If you're first year in our district, but you have 3 consecutive years experience in another district, after the first year, you can move up to a level 3 teacher, but like a brand new teacher would go level 1, level 2A, 2B, 3. So the longer you're with us, the more career development you're eligible for. So our level 3 teachers are the only ones that do a teacher leader project, which you may hear us talk about. You know, they take on a lot of extra responsibilities. It's a required 30-hour log of something above and beyond. It can't be something they do during the day. So it could be after school tutoring. It could be a run club. It could be a cooking club. There's so many things. And there's a pretty lengthy list in our career development document that are examples of, but not requirements. And principals do have discretion on those. If something unique comes up to their school, then they can allow that TLP to go. All teachers are doing teacher action plan for student growth. And then, so the principals are marking yes or no on this. And then what level of compensation they get is the end of it. And that's what they get in their summer paycheck. Next slide. That's.
Okay, so thank you very much for that piece that I feel like I know it, I've heard it, and then every time I see it, it seems as complicated as it did the very first time. So thank you for walking through that and showing us all of that. I know previously we had some questions about teacher evaluations and, kind of the ladder effect, right? The evaluations kind of come into the performance pay piece and then they sort of go up from there. So I'll open the floor to everyone and we can start questions and dialogue. But first I wanted to ask just kind of the blanket question of set the expectation for me tonight of the kind of information that you're looking for from us. I know this is only the first time we'll talk about it. So what is the timeline and what is the process? A couple of us have been through it. Jeremy has not. So what is the process for this performance pay and what are we looking at in terms of feedback for tonight?
So for my piece, because on the one slide that Wendy had, where she lists where you see all of these different things in different documents, in slide, I think it's slide 6. So it comes in the salary placement chart, but so we all have different timelines, but the career development and performance compensation plan needs to be completed and it usually comes to the board for approval in June. And that's when we have the goals, the award goals set. Wendy's consolidated 301 plan will come later because some of her funding isn't exact at the same time that mine is. And that's why some districts have a 301 plan and everything's together, but they don't have the complicated system that we have. So we have 2, and that's why you'll see some redundant information across the board. So for this piece, I would like your feedback to answer your question about the professional development. Really was the one thing that we had a big conversation about. And our team will be meeting in our committee meets in a week or 2. And that's one of the things on our agenda. So I wanted to be able to bring some stuff from you back to them. Like, is 15, are you still feeling like 15 is too low? How are they feeling? Was 15, they're there, and do we shoot for 20, 25? What are we looking at? So I'd like your thoughts on that.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so I'll open the floor now for questions and dialogue. So we're looking at the 3, basically the performance criteria as described to us. We'll start with the professional development, but I'll open it up for the other two also if you have any comments or questions about that. So let's kind of start there.
Thank you.
Anyone want to go first? Any questions or comments?
I will comment. As you said, Gina, we talked before about PD, and I know one of my pieces of input after our last conversation was that I would like to see something potentially that's tiered so that we could actually reward those folks who are performing at an even higher level than the minimum that we're seeing there. So I would reiterate that I think 15 hours, what we currently have, is too low. I will say I looked up, and this is an older plan, but for the Kyrene School District on their Prop 301 performance plan, and this is from the 14-15 school year, they have PD requirements, and they actually have those requirements that must be related to their job outside of contract hours. So they say that it could, that you can receive no other compensation for this PD, and that meetings, clubs, and the like are not considered PD for 301 requirements. I feel like two sides to that. One is we're asking for 15 hours and we're giving them significantly more hours than that during their contract time to complete that. So I think one of two things could happen. We could maybe stay at the 15 hours, but have it be required outside of their contract hours. Or I would like to see some sort of tiering, even potentially an increase in the lowest required hours, but the ability to give additional rewards for folks who might put in an extra 5 hours or 10 hours on top of those minimums that we're setting.
Thank you. That tiered idea, that's a great idea. The only difference I see with us in Kyrene is Kyrene does not do a teacher leader project. So in addition to 15, 20, 30 hours of PD outside the day, we're already asking for 30 hours for the teacher leader project. So I would just keep that in mind as we're talking about it.
Okay, but they're getting compensated for that, correct? They get specific compensation for that teacher leader project. Okay, so we're not asking for them to do more without pay.
Yeah.
They're getting compensated for that.
They get $1,100 for putting 30 hours in.
Okay. Can I ask a question? I don't know what the other board members would like to interject, but can I ask a question on career ladder since we're kind of on that? We mentioned how this adds a certain level of complication and how we've stuck with this program when other districts have moved away from this. When we look at our big picture and how we want to compensate our teachers, do we think career ladder and career development is a program that we want to continue? Do teachers want to continue that? Does it match up with our strategic plan, or is it something that we should consider revamping and including that pay in a different way?
We have considered revamping it, and we've talked about different ways to do it. We would, like you said, give that compensation in a different way, but if we don't do it, we have to give the compensation another way, or we do pay cuts because they're already getting the money. So
yeah, I have no problem getting the money. I want to make sure that we're getting the bang for the buck that we're trying to get, and I understand that some of these pieces of compensation were provided as ways to really give teachers as much pay as possible, which I am an advocate for, but our teachers have gotten some nice raises over the last couple of years. And so I think if we're going to revamp something, and again, my goal is to try to reward those teachers who are doing even more and who we want to retain. And I know we have some amazing teachers out there who are doing a fantastic job. I just want to make sure that the pay and the compensation that we're giving makes sense with why we're giving it to them, and that we're actually seeing the productivity and the end result that we're trying to get to.
I'll put that on our agenda to look at a couple of different things. What you just said, then also making sure that aligns, that what we're doing with career development aligns with our strategic plan, and kind of line that out and bring. So I will I mean, just, I know you guys have a lot of other questions, but we'll plan on an update after our meeting of kind of where we're at with some of the questions that you have tonight and the things that the committee discussed and shared.
Okay,
Great.
I want to kind of address the feeling or the kind of the comment about if we don't find another way, you know, if we revamp the performance pay, and we don't give it to them, or we don't find another way to give it to them, we're in essence, they're taking a pay cut. I don't know that I agree with that completely, because performance pay is not guaranteed. It should not be guaranteed. You're getting paid for performing. And so if we look at it as they're getting a pay cut, it's like they're not getting a pay cut in their salary, they're getting a pay cut in their performance pay. And so I want us to look at this criteria as we're offering them opportunities to do an even better job than they're already doing. I'm not saying they're not doing a great job, but I don't want to look at it as a pay cut, because it's not a pay cut. I mean, this isn't guaranteed funding. They have to do these things in order to get the money. So I just want to be careful that I'm not suggesting that people are getting a pay cut, because this has nothing to do with their base salary or anything like that, because those words are scary to people.
And we're very clear about that in the contracts and everything we do on the website. But if you have a level 3 teacher in our district that's been with us for a long time, I can guarantee you if they've done a teacher leader project every single year and earned that $1,100. So if we don't find another way for them to have the opportunity to earn that $1,100, then in essence, it would be a pay cut. That's
right. And that's the catchphrase, I think, is offering them the opportunity to earn it. Right. I mean, that's what the performance pay is. Instead of, you know, they maybe see it as a pay cut, but I don't look at it as that. I'm with you. We just need to find another opportunity for them to earn that. And I don't think by revamping it, we would use that money for something else. I think we just figure out another opportunity for them to earn it. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that people didn't think we were at any point saying that we were going to cut anybody's pay, because I don't think anybody wants to do that.
No.
I knew what you meant, but I just wanted to make sure anyone listening that might have thought otherwise. I'll jump in with 2 things really quick, and then I'll let the other board members talk as well. I like Kim's idea about professional development. I like keeping this criteria of professional development. It is very important to us as a district. I think it's something that Jody has advocated for to us as a board, to keep funding in there and to keep pushing that and offering more and more to her staff. So I think I'm assuming that, you know, Jody, you're supporting this as well. You always talked about that. I think it aligns really well with our people pillar and the strategic plan of, you know, growing and develop leadership at all levels. So no matter whether you're a first-year teacher or an administrator, you're offered all kinds of PD throughout the way, and we're, you know, giving you time to do that. I like the tiered effect. I will say, I don't think 15 hours is enough. I think we offer them a lot of contract time to do professional development. And so I like the idea of, if it's a tiered thing, that maybe there are some hours that you can achieve or earn more if you do it outside on your own time. And then there's some that, you know, are included maybe in contract time or stuff like that. So I would like to see that number go up, because like you showed us earlier, I mean, we've got people that are hitting double the amount in just January. So our teachers are totally capable and are going to do that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
One thing we haven't talked about, I mean, another piece of criteria is the professionalism criteria. I am in favor of just getting rid of this altogether and replacing it. I think I was, you know, I'm not totally in favor of it before, but I'm fine with the way that it is now. I just think that's not a reach for anyone. Like, not being reprimanded should be basic for every job. And so I don't think any of our teachers really the majority of our teachers struggle to do that. And so I think we should create another criteria that is more aspirational, or, you know, more of a performance indicator rather than just not being reprimanded. You know, I will leave that out there. Melissa.
Okay. I will take that one back to the team too and see, because we had a lot of other ideas, you know, for awards and things. So we can bring some of those other ideas back and think that, not to be like disciplinary, but if someone does get written up to that point, then there is no real consequence except a letter in your file. So while all the good people get rewarded for not getting written up, then if you would reach that level of discipline, there is no consequence except what normally would happen in any other school district, which would be the letter would go in your file and hopefully it wouldn't happen again.
Right.
So
no, that's a good point. Jeremy or Melissa?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Well, I kind of agree on the professionalism because yeah, actually, I think it should be a negative. You should give more money for things that are positive, and then if they get reprimanded, that would be subtracted from some of the other bonuses. Just an idea to throw out there, but I think that's more than fair, that if somebody is off a lot of days and stuff like that, they shouldn't be entitled to the goodies, the bonuses, and they're not bad, your bonuses. Secondly, I mean, I think everything needs to be incentive based, and obviously, but sometimes, it's easy to overlook the obvious. Is the school getting something out of it? I understand it's good to give incentives to people that are going to work harder and do stuff, but are we just doing make work, that they add up more hours and they get more? So it just seems like a criterion. Again, I'm sure you all think of that, but it always, I think, needs to be evaluated is it's not just to retain teachers, but we can do both, retain teachers and make darn sure that we're benefiting out of it somehow, that maybe it's saving us money somewhere else. And then other than that, I just have a quick question. What defines student growth? Is that like test scores or students growing taller or more students?
It's the mark on the door. It's actually, so the student growth component is, if we can go back to that slide, to one of the slides, Stevie, with the rubric, it's at the beginning of the year assessment and then the end of the year assessment. And it's the same. So it'd be like Dibbles reading for a kindergartner, and then the end of the year and the growth that they made in between. And
perfect.
And then,
no, I got that, and I saw that with the study group in December that Brian, discussed that. So.
Oh, okay. And the teacher action plan ties into the student growth rubric. So if they have students, they may make their growth coefficient, but they may have students that did not make the growth, and they reflect on those students, and then we target those students for the next year. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good incentive.
All right. Thank you, Stevie.
Thanks, Jeremy. Melissa, comments?
I just want to reiterate and kind of echo with Danielle and Kim about the PD hours, because like Danielle said, our teachers have already reached it and we're only halfway through the year. I mean, end of the year, they have till May, right, to get their hours, and they've already hit it. So what's the point of them doing anything else the rest of the year? And I know they will, because it's good for them. And I totally have faith in our teachers that they're going to take advantage. But I think that we should look at higher. I agree, like either it needs to be a lower number and they've got to do it on their own, or the higher number to be more matching with what we are offering our teachers as it is, because we do spend a lot of money on professional development, and I want to make sure that they are taking full advantage of that, so we are not throwing that money away.
Good point. And the other point, Danielle made a good point too, is a combo also. And I've seen other districts do that, where some is on contract to a certain degree and then off contract for others. And remember, before this year, they were never tracking PD, and they were always 100% engaged and not taking off the Fridays and not leaving early on our early release days. So we know that our teachers are going to maintain that standard, but I like your idea and I appreciate that.
I have a question, Gina. I'm going to throw this out there, and I don't want to take us off track, but I just want to see if this is a possibility. So with the performance criteria right now, we have 3, right? We have the professional development, the professionalism, and the student growth. I think as long as I've been here or been involved at this level, I think it's always been 3. I don't think we've had any other number. Is there a reason for that? Could we have 4? Or I'm not trying to make things more complicated, but I guess what I'm saying is I understand your point about the professionalism. Like, I do still feel strongly that it shouldn't be a benchmark we're trying to reach, right? But I do understand your point of but we also want to find a way to make sure that people that are being reprimanded, or that if we are having people that are struggling with our professionalism standards, that we're obviously not incentivizing them. Can we just add a criteria, have 4? And I mean, is 3 a set number, I guess is what I'm asking.
No, 3 is not a set number. We could have 2, we could have 4, we could have 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And just to wrap this up, if anyone doesn't have any more comments, if I had potential ideas for additional criteria, could I just send them to you so that you could put them out into the committee? It's not necessarily that they come from me, right? They're not board. I mean, I'm just, I've been looking at some other districts and what they do, and everyone's situation is so unique. So it's really hard to say this would totally work here, or because it's, to your point about Kyrene, like we do some things, they do other things. And so it's hard to say apples to apples.
Sure.
But there was some interesting things about culture and leadership and equity and other things that I don't think we can copy and paste, right? And that's what I'm saying. I don't think we could take someone else's and say, this is going to 100% work in LESD, but I like the idea of some of those things, and they align really well with our strategic plan and some other things we're working on. So it might be something, if you take the big idea back, I'm sure your committee could say, hey, this is how it would actually work for, how we could break it down and all of that kind of stuff. So if that's okay, I'm happy to share some of those ideas offline.
Sure, that would be great, Danielle. And if anyone else has opportunities, ideas, email them to me. And if you could do it like in the next, I can't remember if we're meeting next Thursday. So if you could get them to me by Wednesday, so I could bring them to the committee and we could discuss them, that would be fantastic. So thank you so much for your feedback.
Mm-hmm. Great, yeah, thank you.
I have one more.
Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, I do have one more area that I would like to discuss that's related to this. It's something that I've been mulling around, and I had expressed this back in our November board meeting when we looked at the number of our teachers who are highly effective and effective. And I'm just wondering how effective our evaluation tool is. When was the last time that was changed or updated in sort of substantial way?
We changed that. I'm trying to remember. I think I was a principal. I couldn't tell you exactly what year it was, but the framework, I'll be honest, the framework of our evaluation is good. It's a really great evaluation tool. Our principals do a nice job. We do our training at the beginning of the year. We practice inter-rater reliability, but it has not, sorry if there's noise in the background, but it hasn't been something that we've taken a strong focus on in PD and really strengthening our inter-rater reliability, as in, you go with me to my school and how would you evaluate teachers, and looking at it in that sense. And that's something that we plan to do in the future. That's just, there's just a list of things that we kind of plan to do that we'd like to get to. So when we talk about doing that, and John Scudder is now a trainer for ASA in doing the evaluation training. So having him do that for our principals and really looking at, it's not necessarily the tool, but it's the focus and the lens that you're using and making sure that everyone's using that same lens.
Okay. So would you say that the evaluation itself is reflective of our strategic plan and where we're trying to get to with that?
I haven't looked at it from that lens, so I would have to take a look and see as far as, overall, yes. But the equity piece and some of the other new stuff that we've been doing this year, we'd have to look at.
And
Okay.
I was going to say, can we have it on our study session in April to talk about our evaluation practices too, to go more in depth?
Okay.
Just so you know.
Okay. Which is fine. We can talk about that more in depth at that point. My concern, I'm just going to echo my concern because I'm going to keep echoing this, I think, until something changes here, which is, when you come from a corporate environment, there's basically going to be a curve on your evaluations, and you're going to have some people at the top, some people in the middle, some people toward the bottom. And, when I look back at my notes from the November meeting and we have 96% of our teachers as highly effective, I just have a hard time swallowing, although I know we have amazing teachers, that truly only 4% of our teachers are only effective, and none are even below that, and similar for the principals. So I just, I know you're working on this. This would not be an overnight change in the least. I just want to say that is on my mind, that I don't think this tool is really accomplishing what we wanted to accomplish. So let's continue to talk about it and work toward that.
I do want to say one thing though, about the point range for highly effective is a wide category too. It's 85 to 116 points. So there is a wide range of people in that highly effective category. It's not like everybody in that 96% is 116 points. Like we have people down at 85. So.
But the compensation is the same, right? The merit bump that people are getting. It doesn't matter if you're at the low end of highly effective or the high end of highly effective. They're all getting that highly effective rating, correct?
They get that highly effective rating, which really is a benefit to the district more than anyone. The highly effective rating doesn't impact the teacher at all. It goes to the Arizona Department of Education for us to report. And so then they have the list of how many highly effective teachers we have in the district. So there's no impact on the teacher for what their effective rating is. And I know that doesn't, and that's the only reason that we do that is because we have to report to the state. So, and everyone has to report to the state how their teachers rate into their categories. So I think having Brian take a look at this again and looking at the point values and the range in every category and just seeing, like if we take a span of, and we haven't done this, we haven't taken on this project. This is very time consuming to take. We would take everybody, do kind of the curve that you're talking about and see where people are falling and what we're looking at. And we've done it on a small scale over the years, but nothing to really say like, is this? So it's definitely worth taking a look at, but I don't know if that helps.
Okay, because don't you think that's needed to differentiate for principals who are leading their teachers to know who needs more mentoring, who needs more supports and that sort of thing to become higher performing? Or I just think the more of those sorts of things we can have in writing, just from an HR perspective, is valuable. I mean, if we're telling 96% of our teachers, it doesn't really get any better than this.
But it does. If you're a highly effective teacher and you only scored 85 points in Litchfield, that's not that good because the person next door to you is highly effective and they have 116 points and they all know how well they do, but that's beside the point. It's just, I lost my train of thought, but.
Well, Gina, to that point, while you're trying to think of that, to that same end, is it, if we control or we create that evaluation tool for ourselves, correct? Mm-hmm. I mean, we just sort of determine what that is. Mm-hmm. Is it possible to go in and look and say, it might not be effective to have a 30-point swing for highly effective? Like maybe highly effective is 15 to 20 point swing, but maybe it's 85 to 100. And then you see what I'm saying? Like if we made the groupings smaller, therefore it would qualify people in different ways. Maybe that would be part of it too. I mean, I think that's part of a broader looking at the whole thing. You don't just change point values. I'm just saying maybe that would be it too, that if you really narrow down the categories.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying by it would be worth having Brian take a look at all of this because Brian has been in all of this since the very beginning. But the other thing that I want to make sure that you guys are aware of as far as our principals go is they treat our teachers very much like our teachers treat their students at the beginning of the year. They're in every single classroom. They create a tiered plan that is red, yellow, green. And then they have their green teachers that they're going to go in once a week and pop in. They have their yellow teachers who seem to be struggling a little bit. They're going to go in 2 or 3 times a week. People really struggling, we're going to get the coach in there. We intervene. We're not going to let somebody get all the way to May and be an ineffective teacher. I mean, there is work along the way. So being highly effective comes with a lot of work behind it. Not everyone starts the year being effective, but they start, and I can share those with you sometime too, but it's kind of, it's an intervention plan for teachers. And we all do it at the beginning of the year. And I think, I can't even remember who started it, maybe Rochelle out at Scott Libby or something, but it's a really effective tool. And we share that with the coach, and then the coach is in there and knows who really needs that cyclical training.
I think that I think all of that is really good, Gina, and is effective. I think, but building on what Kim said, the curve, just another dimension of that is that the school has the incentive to report that things are good, but there's also the perception of the public looking at overall, test scores and things like that. And I think there's definitely a little bit from at least people that I've talked to, there seems to be a little disconnect that everybody's up on the top 4% or almost everybody is in terms of the person on the, that looks at the school district as a whole in terms of national, the aims or whatever test scores.
And we have our student growth coefficients and how they correlate to the teacher evaluations, and they're pretty good. I mean, they line up pretty well. Now, Brian, I mean, we can't do that this year from this year's scores or last year's scores because we don't have the good data, but Brian's done that in the past, and our highly effective teachers are performing at that high level. So,
Gina, can you tell me a little bit more about what you said about how having more teachers rated highly effective is for our benefit?
It just looks better. And it's not that we try to do that or we're trying to do that, but I'm just saying you would want to be careful how you're going to change this, because if you're putting all of this weight in the teacher evaluation system, which is the 5 parts of the planning, the instruction, the learning climate, the assessment, and the professionalism, then you're going for your end of the year thing, and you're not looking at everything that's done up throughout the course of the year. I think as a former principal, I don't put a lot of weight in that teacher evaluation as changing their practice, because we get to it at the end of the year. It's kind of their final thing, and you're out the door. We have been working all year long to decide if you're coming back or you need an improvement plan, so, and it's a benefit. There's really no benefit to it except that it wouldn't be great if we had a bunch of ineffective teachers either, which we already know we don't. So
yeah, so you're telling me there's no monetary impact to having a higher percentage of highly effective teachers. There's none of our A ratings or any of that is based on highly effective teachers. So what is that information used for? So I guess what I'm trying to get to is when we say we're evaluating 96% of our teachers as being highly effective, and we're reporting that to the state, I'm trying to get to, is that accurate? Do we have 96% highly effective teachers, or is our evaluation tool really not telling us what we think it's telling us?
So I think they're a little bit, I think it's complicated. Like when I was a principal, I never even looked at the highly effective, that type of thing. I looked at level 1, were you effective as a level 1 teacher? Of course, I'm not expecting you to perform at a level 3, but I'm expecting you to meet that criteria. And then 2A, 2B, 3. So those are the pieces that I was looking for. And that's what I focused on. This was an additional piece that was added in, through legislation about being able to report the performance of all teachers from different districts. So that kind of came in more of an after the fact instead of embedded into the heart of it. But I think it is a good discussion. And I think kind of looking at all the different inter-rater reliabilities. And then I think that what we do is look at also kind of going back to what also Jeremy was saying, but let's see what our counterparts are looking like. Like it might seem like, oh my gosh, 96% of highly effective just seems so high. But if we're looking at Kyrene and Deer Valley and Paradise Valley and all the people that we typically compete with, are they setting about the same? And
And they
so
are, Jody.
I think that's good information to kind of look at. And
yeah, but that just tells me they're probably doing the same thing with their evaluations, which is putting 96% of their teachers in this category, whether it's impactful or not, because they want to look a certain way. And I'm more interested in what's actually happening and the transparency piece.
Yes, Kim. And so if you're really interested in what's actually happening, then I wouldn't even worry about the highly effective ratings, because we don't do anything with those. They don't play into, we're trying to get you 85 points so you can be highly effective. That's just kind of how it shakes out. Sort of like what Jody just said, is we had a teacher evaluation system, and then we got a new statute that said you need to report teachers. So Brian made cut points based on our evaluation, he made cut points for who would fall into what categories.
So how is a teacher's performance then documented? If this document should be ignored?
Well, I'm not saying it should be ignored. I'm just saying you can't put all your weight in the evaluation. It's a whole year-long process. And, I think a principal and an instructional coach wouldn't be doing their jobs if they didn't get their teachers to certain levels by the end of the year. We wouldn't be doing a good job with our PD. There's a lot of things that we would need to work on systematically if our teachers weren't performing well.
Okay, maybe another, and we can table this discussion for the April timeframe, but maybe another thing to potentially look at would be treating our teachers in a similar way at the evaluation like we do our students. Get a beginning of the year and an end of the year, and see what the growth is. Maybe teachers who have higher growth than would have some sort of reward or something for that, or principals who bring their teachers' growth up would be similar to the growth coefficients we look at for students, something like that. So
yeah,
I'm done for today.
I agree. Yeah, I agree, Kim. We're going to need to move on. We still have our community education update with Dr. Stair, but we will just table this until April, and then we'll go. So if there's any ideas or questions in the meantime, Gina, is that okay if we send those to you or whatever, and then we'll prepare for that next April session?
Absolutely. So I've been trying to take as many notes as I can, but if you have something that you're really, let's get that on there so that I can make sure I have Brian pull data and we can have everything that you're wanting to know in front of you so that we can all make some decisions.
One thing I'll say just really quickly before we stop, I think, or go to the next subject, I think it might be important to invite Monica or someone from her team. Jody, I know you have a really strong HR background as well, to give us the kind of the approach to evaluating people in general. I know right now in the world of HR, yearly evaluations are really going by the wayside. Like that's, they're doing it quarterly or that kind of thing. And I am by no means saying that we need to have a quarterly assessment of all of our teachers. Principals, please don't freak out on me. What I'm just saying is some of the framework behind that evaluation piece is changing sort of in the world in general in HR. So I'd love to get some of that, like, what are we actually doing with this information? To your point, Gina, if a teacher starts off ineffective or maybe struggling in some areas, I don't want to use ineffective, but is struggling in some areas, at the end of the year, they are highly effective. That evaluation is just going to say they're highly effective, but it doesn't really capture the entire year, because nowhere on there is it going to say they were struggling. So we're missing part of that. And I think, I don't know how to capture that. I'm not an HR person, but I think that might be an interesting approach to, I've seen the teacher evaluations. I know they are complex. They are intense. As a principal and coaches and everything, you are looking at every single angle of how that person is teaching and instruction and, growth and all of that kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot. I think there are things that we can do based on these conversations and probably make the evaluation process easier at the same time and still get the information that the board seems to be looking for.
And still follow statute.
I'm sorry?
And still follow statute.
Oh,
we have statutory requirements. So a lot, we're tied to certain things, but yes, we are totally open to looking at this and getting your feedback.
Okay, we will table and move on, but reconvene in April session.
Yes, we will do that. Thank you guys. I'm going to log off for a second because my nieces from Boston just walked in the door.
Okay,
so, thank you.
Thank you, Gina. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on, Dr. Sarah, thank you so much for your patience with us. We are on to Community Education Program Update and are ready for your presentation.
Awesome, thank you, good evening. I think my nieces from Boston just came in the door. I'm gonna, I know it says on the agenda that it's a community education update. We will be focusing more on preschool tonight. I'll be happy to answer whatever questions you may have about extended day as well, but preschool is kind of the focus of the presentation here. Next slide, please. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about aligning our costs and our income with our goal of equitably providing preschool programs which are high quality, accessible, and affordable while remaining fiscally solvent. And that's kind of the key phrase there is fiscally solvent. Of course, with COVID and with the reduction in enrollment and the limitations in class sizes, we are spending more than we're making on staffing and other costs. And so I think at the outset, I want to establish that while we can limp through this year, I think it has to be non-negotiable that we start next year in the black and we stay in the black from then on. And so that's kind of the focus of this, this presentation. Next slide, please. So aligning this with our strategic plan, you know, kind of a dual pillar there, finances and resources. We want to eliminate the financial deficit by a combination of cost reductions and increased income, while continuing to provide high quality preschool services for our students and their families. So in terms of what's best for kids, of course, there's a lot we can talk about there, but really we're talking about the viability of the program itself. You know, we believe it's best for kids for us to have a preschool program, and we simply can't continue to have a preschool program at our current rate of spending and our current rate of income, and that's going to have to change. And so our income must increase, our expenditures must decrease in order to continue to provide preschool services at all. So our financial impact, current status for fiscal year 2021. So this would be from the beginning of July. We're at a spending deficit of $1,024,000, almost $24,000. And that is, you know, that we've spent that much more, mostly on staffing, than we've taken in revenue. Our forecast for fiscal year 22, and I want to point out the assumptions underneath there first. Of course, there's a lot of ways we can bend numbers, and so in order to come with these figures, I had to assume the current number of classes stays the same. The class size capacity remains at current levels, which is 13 per class. And I wanted to kind of make a comment on that. If you have 13 kids sitting in the classroom, the equivalent tuition that you're getting would be about 11.2 kids, because some of them are getting an employee discount. Some may be there getting a discount because they're part of a developmental program. And if it's a class that has a lot of employees' kids in it, you may even be getting the equivalent of 7 or 8 kids worth of tuition. And so, but 13 per class in actual physical bodies is what we can have in there right now. The same percentage of employee discounts, no increase in salaries, enrollment at capacity. In other words, we fill every one of those 13 spots per class, and that our tuition rates stay the same. So all those things assumed, then next year we would bring in about $992,000. And we would spend, if we kept our current staffing, about $1,217,000, giving us a shortfall of about $250,000. And so, of course, there's two strands here. One would be in decreasing costs. Staff pay and benefits account for nearly 95%. Actually, I got a revised figure on that. It's about 93.4% of program costs. But the vast majority of our costs are staff pay, and so that's what we have to affect if we're going to change the situation. And so I don't know why they all changed to ones, but there's 3 options there that we'll consider. One would be continuing to employ only certified teachers. And on the next slide, I'll go over what the ramifications of that would mean. But clearly, if we're going to continue to employ only certified teachers, we're going to have to have more kids in the classroom. If we could go back. There you go, thanks. The next one would be transitioning some teaching positions to credentialed classified staff gradually by attrition. And then the next option would be transitioning some or all teaching positions to credentialed classified staff by transfer or RIF of certified teachers. Okay, next slide, thanks. So proposal 1, that's where we would keep all of our current certified teachers. So all of our teachers would remain as certified positions. That would be most likely to preserve program quality, which is wonderful. Our teachers do a great job, but it would require higher tuition rates. We would need much larger class sizes than we have now. We would need about 18.6, so 19 kids per classroom on average in order to break even at that with our current staffing. And closing programs with the lowest attendance. In other words, we wouldn't be able to fill all the classrooms with our current attendance rates, so we'd have to close some classrooms and combine those programs, which means, of course, we'd have fewer teachers anyway. The next proposal, which was gradually attrition into some classified positions from certified. We do have 2 teachers who have already announced their intention to not come back next year. And we would start with those 2 positions. There may be a third that's coming. And so if you had those 3, that would make a significant impact. Right now, it's a ratio of almost 3 to 1 in cost for a classified credentialed teacher versus a certified teacher. And that, as it says there, it attempts to strike a balance between maintaining program quality and looking out for the best interests of our current employees and maintaining our future program viability, just being able to keep the doors open. The magnitude of the impact on tuition, of course, depends on the number of certified staff attrited. The more that were attritioned to classified staff, the greater the impact. And then proposal 3, where we simply go away from certified staff altogether right now. This is the old system that we used to do 11 or 12 years ago. All of our preschool teachers were classified. I want to stop and explain really quick the difference between certified and credentialed. Certified, of course, have certification from the Arizona Department of Education. They have a regular teaching contract with the district. They're entitled to the same pay and all the same benefits and the same benefit structure as any other teacher in the district. Whereas a credentialed teacher, there are 4 credentialing agencies that you can go through, and they would have to have one of those credentials. And there's many credentialing agencies, but there are 4 that are accepted in Arizona, and that ADHS licensing would accept. And so if they had one of those 4 credentials, then they could teach preschool. So these aren't just taking a current aide and hoping that they can teach and sticking them in a teaching position. These are people who have demonstrated that they have the at least the rudiments of what preschool teaching is all about through that credentialing program. That would be most likely to keep the tuition low. We wouldn't have to raise tuition. It would put us in the black on day 1 without any changes in our current enrollment. And it allows programs at more campuses. We wouldn't necessarily have to close campuses, but you could see that getting that many people up and moving and ready to go by next August would be a big task, and that could affect program quality. You could see that something like that might get going in fits and starts where not everyone would hit the ground running. They would take a lot of support. And so, that would probably be the most complex option. Of course, I love our teachers and I love the work they do. And certainly it's not my favorite option to consider that, but it is, fiscally speaking, the most viable option. Next slide. So some additional considerations. We're already planning on reducing community education department office staff by 1 person for fiscal year 2022. There'll be a savings there. Our current instructional coach has announced that she'd like to go back to the classroom next year. And so that's another cost savings. We likely wouldn't replace her, or at best would replace her with a half-time position. We've already reduced the number of classroom assistants this year by 4 positions. And so when I talk about current staffing, we're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel in terms of being able to serve our kids with the number of people that we have. We're already considering discontinuing the use of our teaching strategies, gold, and creative curriculum. In conversations with the teachers, many of them feel that we could do just as well as those programs. However, those programs do offer a lot of resources that make their jobs easier. That consumes nearly 5%, so like 0.42% of our current budget annually. So it's not a huge chunk of the budget, but when you look at it on paper, it sure seems like a lot of money and that we could do something better with. And this next one, on further consideration, it doesn't really matter a whole lot. If field trips are reinstated, it would pose a small additional cost. But if field trips are reinstated, that means that COVID restrictions are no longer an issue and our class sizes are going to be larger and the field trips really aren't going to be a major consideration. Next slide, please. So we talked about decreasing costs. This will be more about increasing income. Currently, our income, all income, is from tuition and enrollment. There are no other, grant-funded programs or anything like that that are bringing in a lot of money for us. And so we have some options. We can increase our tuition rates. You may recall that we increased by 10% last year. We could increase enrollment. And of course, that's easier said than done, but we can expand capacity limits. We can do some aggressive marketing. It may help to offer state subsidies like DES funding. In the past, DES guidelines and the requirements of DES they're pretty onerous. There's a lot that's involved there. And it really wasn't worth it from an accounting standpoint, but with such low enrollment, it may be time when we say, okay, it's worth it. We could offer some non-traditional options, such as online preschool. We haven't had a lot of call for that, but we haven't really polled parents to say, do you want online preschool? Just when preschool was getting ready to start this year, we had, I think, 2 parents who said, so are you going to offer an online option? And preschool doesn't work very well online. It take a pretty innovative approach to make it work. I don't think you could charge full price preschool because you really can't keep kids online for 3 to 7 hours a day unless you're kind of chaining the parent to the computer as well. But there are some online preschool options that we could do and at least get some money from that. Flexible scheduling options, niche options or niche, however you prefer to say it. That would include things like perhaps having a STEM-based preschool class, or maybe doing a Montessori or Reggio Emilia. There's different approaches that may appeal to different parents, and offering those at different schools and seeing if that is something that by kind of specializing in certain places, if that would draw in more enrollment. We could also offer summer preschool, which we haven't done in the past except for as part of camp, but camp isn't preschool specific. And so it'd be more like a preschool specific camp that's really all about preschool. Vacation daycare, that's one thing I think that drives a few parents to enroll at some commercial daycares because they may have to work on holidays or things like that, or over our winter break, and offering daycare during those times, not necessarily preschool, but daycare during those times may be something that would draw more parents in. And then simply concentrating more students in fewer classrooms. And by that, I don't mean packing them in like sardines. I mean consolidating the campuses where there's very low enrollment. We did that last year already. There were 2 schools that we collapsed the programs at their sites and transferred kids to other locations. So, and of course, there's a lot of impact we could talk about in any of these measures. We could talk all night, let's not, but some of the impacts we have are reducing the number of classrooms to concentrate students at a few campuses would reduce the number of teachers. If you're closing programs, you have fewer teachers. A tuition increase, our last increase of 10% placed us at or near the same level as many of our commercial competitors, at least on a per hour basis. If you look at their rates on their rate sheets, many of them are quite a bit higher than us, but some of them are offering 13-hour days. Like I mentioned before, some of them are open on holidays and things like that. So on a per hour basis, we're about level with many of our competitors. And then larger class sizes can affect the quality of a program. And I just think that's a given. Sorry, I had to close my door there. Some additional considerations, just things to think about. My crystal ball doesn't cover what's going to happen next fall. We don't know in the fall whether the CDC will be recommending that kids can now be 3 feet apart instead of 6, or you can have more kids in a room safely, or we don't know how soon kids will be getting vaccines if parents choose to do that. There's just a lot that we don't know about opening in the fall. So it's possible we'll open in the fall and we'll have to keep it at 13 kids per room again, or it's possible that we'll open in the fall and we can safely manage a larger number. So enrollment may naturally increase as those concerns begin to subside. We don't know yet what will be considered a safe class size. Currently, 1 in every 4 of our preschool enrollees receive a 20% employee discount. I could see that percentage actually going down if our enrollment increases. You know, there's only so many staff member kids out there. And if you have more kids in a classroom, fewer of them. And so our net profit would actually rise if that happened. And then, as I mentioned before, offering DES subsidies for parents next year could possibly increase enrollment, especially at our Title I schools. We do usually late in the summer, you know, school's about to start in a week, and we'll get 4 or 5 calls from parents saying, do you accept DES subsidies? And of course, that's pretty late in the game. You know, you can't do it at that point, but if we had it set up for next year, which we're planning on doing, then again, I wish my crystal ball could tell me how many families it'll bring in, but we can expect an increase in enrollment from that. And then just timelines for completion and implementation. I know you're probably aware of all of this. Certified staff, we need to notify teachers right away, and certainly before contracts are issued if we're not bringing any number of them back. Classified staff, certainly by May, we would need to let them know if they were interested in becoming teachers next year. It does take a little while. Some of them are ready to roll. Some of them already have associate's degrees or even bachelor's degrees in early childhood education, and it would be easy for them to get the necessary requirements done. But certainly we need time to hire them and to train them in how we do things, especially our assessment methods. And then parent notification, you know, our initial enrollment season opens in 2 weeks, in less than 2 weeks. And we've extended it through March 19th this year. And that'll happen in 2 strands. And so there will be those who are accepted, and that's returning students and their siblings and the children of staff members, and then filling in the class up to 13 with everybody else who enrolls. And that'll be the first strand. And then the second strand is those who are admitted, should we be allowed to have more than 13 kids in the classroom. And so there's going to be those 2 strands, and hopefully we can accommodate as many parents as possible. One thing that does for us is if there's a lot of people in that second strand, it tells us that it's time to open another classroom, which would be very good news for us. All right. I know that was a lot of information very quickly, and so
I'm ready to go if anybody's ready. I looked at this, a very excellent presentation, very thorough. Thank you very much. I've done a little thinking about this, and anybody that's had an au pair or au pairs knows that you don't need a master's degree to teach preschool. In fact, what I would see is using your method 3 down there and get away with the lowest paid employees. And then I would consolidate them in middle schools the combination like Bell and Soto, and pull middle school students to go in there and be assistants. And because there's a lot to do with maturity of kids. And this is what's really the model that's used in Europe. That kids are basically, school kids are more mature by the time they graduate because they've been taking care, they've been doing child care. The other thing is that you definitely should be putting a STEM program in Montessori, because if you've got lower skilled help, then having more structure is going to make it more predictable and easy. And the other thing is that these kids are ones that are going to be in kindergarten or going to be in coming to school in a couple of years. Well, I think it would be very nice to have them understand a lot more, so that when they do enter the kindergarten of formal schooling, you know, they know a lot more. And so it's crazy to not do that. So kind of like, I think just, you know, really pound on these kids, and kids that are engaged are just going to be easier. And then you've got your master degree person who's roving around and just, you know, going from place to place, and maybe can see video on the phone or whatever when they're not there, something comes up, so they could be a lot of places at once. So that's all just, and it definitely should be not run at a loss. It doesn't need to be, I don't think. I think there's a lot of opportunity. That's my take.
Thanks, Jeremy. Melissa, I'll open. I'm sorry, I'm echoing, I apologize. You guys want to talk? I'll figure out my sound.
If I could respond to a couple of those things, I think you have some great ideas and you're thinking in a lot of the right directions. One thing to consider is licensing regulations. We do run license programs, actually don't allow middle schoolers to be involved. You can have high school juniors and seniors, and there are some districts, especially unified districts, that have preschool programs in the high school. And I love the idea. I would love to have a partnership with perhaps Millennium to do that. But yeah, you can't use middle schoolers. In terms of teacher qualifications, one thing we do that may be a little different than, for instance, a commercial daycare is that our regular preschool teachers, our typical preschool teachers, work in conjunction with our developmental preschool teachers to transition kids with special needs in and out of the classrooms. And it does actually take quite a bit of expertise to do that. We really do appreciate our certified teachers and the ability that they have to make that transition successful. We have very high success rate for transitioning kids from special education preschool programs into typical preschool programs. That would be more difficult with classified staff, although not impossible, and certainly more difficult without a coach. You mentioned having a person with a master's degree roaming around, and that's kind of a coaching model there. And certainly there are different iterations of that we could come up with. But again, yeah, there's all kinds of different models you could use.
Okay. Kim, Melissa, questions or comments?
So in looking at this, I definitely think we've got to find a way. I agree. We've got to figure out how to not be losing money every year on preschool. And I know that in the past, we've been able to kind of balance that with extended day, but with not having that, that's definitely, we're going to see that more this year. But I've never been comfortable. I know we've had to do it because we're taking a loss. I've never been comfortable with the idea of us raising the price of preschool because I know that we're trying to be competitive with our other people and we've seen that we charge less, but I want to make sure that we are making preschool available to all our families. The ones that can't afford a higher amount, that's the ones I'm concerned about because those are the kids we probably want to get in the most into school. So I do like that idea of the subsidies possibly being able to go down that route. And I would probably not be comfortable with the whole idea of just getting rid of all our preschool teachers right off the bat and having to tell all our teachers, sorry, you don't have a job next year. That would be horrible. Clearly, I don't like that idea, but I think I could get my head on the middle option of starting to head that way. I know that we pride ourselves on what we offer our kids, and I think that we can still offer that same excellence to our kids while being a little more fiscally responsible and possibly being able to get more kids in. I also don't like the idea of giant, large classes. So I think that middle one kind of balances out the most.
Okay.
Thank you.
Kim?
Yeah, I would agree with Melissa. I personally like the gradual approach of going from certified to the credentialed classified. I think that will give us kind of a trial run to be able to try that and then see what the results are, and without making a clear cut and it being impossible or next to impossible, to get back on that. Dr. Stair, how many certified teachers do we currently have that we would expect to extend contracts to next year? I know you mentioned 2 or 3 that would not be returning.
Right. So if we didn't replace the ones who are leaving, we would be offering contracts to 11.
Okay. Thank you. I also agree with Melissa in that I would like to see more people be able to take advantage of our preschool rather than fewer people. And I think it was last year or maybe the year before, I kind of asked, what's our overall goal with preschool? Is it to do it more as a community service and make sure, especially at our Title I schools, that people are able to afford it? So I am 100% for the DES subsidies and figuring out a way to make that work so that we can service those students who I think need it the most. I would rather see us service more children for a lower tuition rate because I think the impact they can have there, even if it is eventually all from credentialed classified staff versus certified staff, is going to be more impactful down the road than having fewer kids and a higher quality. Hopefully we can maintain high quality, but I hope you understand what I'm saying by that.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's everything. So I'd like to maybe see a middle of the road approach. My only other comment would be, I know one of the things that we've talked about has been the discount that we give to teachers. I wouldn't want to see that go away, but maybe we can again meet in the middle on that as well and kind of gradually change that. Maybe make it a 15% discount next year or something to kind of start moving that needle.
I'll run numbers on with this with the same discount and a different discount, and we'll see what the difference would be.
Okay. I think my questions are similar, but I'll go through a few of them. So with credentialed teachers being classified staff, are they considered full-time, and are they offered benefits or no? Or does it depend on the position?
It would kind of depend on the position. You know, it's really just a matter of the number of hours that they work in the day. If you're not offering benefits, then the ratio of cost actually goes closer to 1 to 4. In other words, you can get 4 of them for the cost of a certified teacher. If you do offer benefits, it's a little less than 1 to 3, which is still huge. And certainly we, you know, if we're going to do this, we want them to stick around. Multi-year growth is what we're looking for in the teachers and the classes. And so I would prefer to have them full-time and to have and offer the benefits. And, you know, we would still realize a cost savings, but we want good people that we're going to keep.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that was my point. Like, what was the ratio? So you answered that question, because if I do agree that I'll be very clear up front. I mean, Megan, you know where I stand on this. We talked about this last year and the year before and things like that, is that we have to be in the black. Like we cannot any longer go in the red. I think preschool was an amazing program. I want every single kid in our entire community to be in our preschool. I'll just say that. I want everybody there. I think that will help tremendously in so many ways, right? I mean, we don't have to get off on that, you guys know. But in order to do that, we have to stay open. And if we can't stay open, so we're going to have to make some tough choices. Nobody wants to do a lot of these things, but if we can do fewer of the things we don't want to do and more of the things that we're comfortable with, I think that's kind of where we're all leaning. So I want to start with that I think, you know, I think the conversation here is going to be on fiscal impact, and that doesn't always come across as, you know, kind of the, you know, empathetic approach that we are used to at Litchfield, because we have tried for a very long time to do everything we possibly can to keep it the way that it is. And I think we're realizing now that it can't stay that way. So we need to make some choices. Anyway, I do think that we are kind of in a double-edged sword here with the wonderful teacher retention that we have at Litchfield, because you know, we have 11 certified staff with preschool. I don't know obviously what their tenure is here, but if we only transition by attrition, how many years is it going to take to get us where we want to go? So that's one question that we need to ask ourselves. If this is going to take 10 years, that's not going to work. I think we know that. No one wants to do number 3. I mean, it's pretty clearly obvious no one wants to do that. I think we're going to have to do some of 2 and some of 3. And one way, this is a question, can we do number 3 by offering, because they are certified teachers, offering preschool staff open positions in our K2 setting? Can we do that so that they are coming out of preschool, but they're still staying within our district and going into other classrooms where their certified position can be used?
Well, that's part of a much larger budget discussion, and I'm not going to claim to know every cat in the bag on that, but I know that with our drop in student enrollment, if there's not a big return of students, then we already have way more teachers than we can employ next year. And so that would seem to indicate that there's not going to be a lot of open positions, even with our normal natural attrition. And so while ordinarily in years past, when we've had these situations where we collapsed a class or something like that, we could almost guarantee there's going to be a first grade or kindergarten position somewhere in the district. And if you want that, it's yours. I can't guarantee that this time because of the situation that we're in. Certainly, there's no group that I need to point out that COVID stinks. But the good news is that before COVID hit, we had to start providing services for free. We were in the black, and our last tuition increase was adequate. It was more than adequate. We were doing fine, and so it was the future looked bright until this virus came around. And so I have a lot of hope and a lot of faith that as things return more to normal and we can start making the adjustments that need to be adjusted, that we're not going to have to change tuition and that we can work our way into the black by the beginning of next year.
So of the 11 certified teachers that we have right now that we would potentially offer contracts to if we kept everyone on staff that we have now, how many total classes would we have next year?
Yeah, to clarify, there's 13 right now. We would be offering contracts to 11 if those two didn't come back and we replaced them with classified staff. And so the classrooms, I haven't counted in a while. So 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 classrooms.
So I guess, you were answering the question. We have 13 positions that we need to.
13 positions, and I should clarify that 2 of those positions are half-time positions. So it's the equivalent of 12 teachers right now, and that's 12 classrooms.
Okay, so out of 12 classrooms, we have 11 teachers that are coming back. And so the attrition would basically be the equivalency, not people, but I mean the equivalency of 1 position.
The equivalent of 1, yeah. Well,
is that enough?
No, because we're not attritioning the 2 half-time people. It's 2 full-time people that we're attritioning. Attriting, I guess, is the correct word. So it would be 10 classrooms and then 2 more with non-certified teachers in them.
Okay, so you're saying, I think we're hearing 2 positions are going from potentially going from certified to credentialed.
That's correct. Yeah. I'm sorry, I was unclear about that.
No, that's okay. No, you were explaining it. It's just, as always, everything's more complicated than it just seems straight up numbers. Okay, so.
And Danielle, President Clymer, Dr. Stair taught me a new word through this called attrited. So I think we're saying 2 teachers would be attrited next year.
Okay. Fancy word. Thank you. So that's why they give you that fancy doctor title, I think, to help us with our vocabulary. Okay, so I understand. I guess the bottom line there, what I'm trying to get to, and I'm sorry it took me so many questions to get there, is 2 positions enough financially to make that transition to where we need to be?
At our current enrollment, no.
Okay, what is that number with our current enrollment?
I don't know that. I would have to do some numbers on that. But it wouldn't be a lot. I can tell you that. We'd be getting close with 3 or 4 positions. We'd be getting pretty close.
Okay.
So.
I agree with the subsidies, specifically at our Title I campuses. I think that would be awesome. I did catch the fact that you said clearly there is more paperwork, there is more administrative work that has to be done. And my only concern is that you also mentioned you're losing one of your administrative staff members in the community ed department, specifically for preschool. Would we be better off? What is the balance there between the subsidies and more people we can bring in because of that, and maybe keeping that position because the workload is going to be too much? It couldn't spread out between the few people that we have or that will be remaining.
That's a good question. DES subsidies, the workload is actually upfront. There's a whole lot that you have to do in order to get it running. And then once it's running, there's a week or a monthly spreadsheet you have to fill out. And you gather attendance rolls and verify which kids actually came. And then yearly, there's a report that you fill out to enroll new families and those kind of things. So upfront, for instance, everyone has to do 18 clock hours of training, and the office staff has to do more than that. And so between now and July or June 31st, there'd be a whole lot to do. After that, the upkeep of it is actually not all that. All that rigorous.
Thank you for clarifying. That's what I wanted to know. So it would be a one-time shot kind of thing. So we wouldn't need to keep that additional staffing. I understand. I do as we talk more about that transitioning teaching positions from certified to credentials, I do have a slight concern that if we had a preschool coach and we're not going to continue that position, I know for staffing and cost reasons why we're doing that, but if we're going to save considerably with the credentialed staffing, it seems to me having that certified position there that can provide that support, that can be there and be a full-time coach, that might be a good reason to spend that money, especially if we do have newer folks to our program and need that additional support.
Yeah, that's a great consideration. Our current coach actually does a double role. She supports the developmental preschool teachers as well as the community ed preschool teachers. And she does a great job with that, but it keeps her very, very busy. And so I'm worried about losing that support, not only from a teacher support standpoint, but she also helps to support those student transitions from the developmental classes back and forth. We do have a evaluation team. There are other people who can step in and fill in some of the gaps on the special ed side of it. I mentioned earlier that one of the half-time teachers that I have is a very experienced and very capable teacher. They're all very capable, but she's a veteran teacher who could act as a coach at least for part of the time and provide some of that support. And so really, you're right. It's a matter of what would we have to, what would we lose by giving up that support? And if it's too much, then we have to find a way to keep that support. So
yeah, absolutely. And if, like you said, if you already, I know you say we're going to be losing the person who is the coach now and potentially that position, but if you have a veteran teacher who it seems like might be a good fit to move to that position, that's one more position, right, that you could then make credentialed because of they would have been attrited. I don't, that's not how you say it. That sounds odd, but so that might even, you're still keeping that salary and I realize that, but if it's a 3-to-1 and that's one more person, that seems like, we're still getting the benefit of the coach because there's, we all know there's something to that certified position, especially someone that's been in our program for a long time. I hate to lose that position, even though I know they cost more because I know the support. And to your point, that between our special ed and developmental preschool, we're just able to serve more people that way. And we're able to better serve those students that way if we have someone that's helping facilitate that. So
President Clymer, can I say something, please? Yes. I think since we are only thinking if we do the middle of the road one, the option 2, and there's only 2, possibly 3 teachers attriting, Ron, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. 3 teachers attriting, then I don't believe adding an additional cost of the coach next year would be fiscally responsible of us. However, when there are more teachers credentialed, I could see keeping that as an option once we know the unknowns of how many people are going to come back or how many people are going to want preschool over next year. We can be evaluating our budget and seeing how our needs and see if we need to make that decision. But I would say with all the unknowns, and if we go the option 2 route, then I would think that we should sit on that, knowing that that's something we'd like to go to once there's more credentialed.
Okay, point well taken. Thank you. 2 more really quick things. I love the idea of the summer preschool. I think, being able to draw in more students and increase tuition, does that also obviously increase our costs? We need to realize that, but that seems to me like a very good idea for some of our students that maybe come to kindergarten that have had 0 exposure to preschool or any other, support of that nature. And maybe they can't afford it for, the 2 years prior, like, some people have been, 3-4-year-old, et cetera, but we can get them into an intense summer program before they start kindergarten.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that at least gives them a leg up to start in some of those places where they maybe haven't been exposed to preschool for all of those years. So I really love that idea. I'd love to see us put something like that together. I think that would benefit a lot of families, especially if we could get some subsidies or grants or whatever to help them. That might be really give those kids a leg up going into kindergarten.
I have a question about you mentioned consolidating. is that a major savings? Because I do see major, I know it's not as convenient for parents, but I do see not if it's savings, but also that it enables you with the scale, economy of scale, that you can do more dramatic things that would attract more people. You know, if you have, you know, you have a little more in-depth program and have presentations and stuff, if you've got a lot of preschools consolidated at one location, a lot of classes.
You know, I wish that there was a simple answer to that. It's actually complex to consider because right now, there's a lot of parents who want their kids in preschool but are simply afraid to send them. And when you consolidate, you're putting a lot more kids in one location, which just could intensify that anxiety in parents. You know, these are very little kids, and they're, you know, they need a lot of guidance and support and help, and so it's understandable that it makes parents nervous. And so another thing to consider is that when you consolidate in one location, there are always a few people who drop out on a convenience factor. You know, we saw that this last summer when we combined Corte Sierra and Dreaming Summit. There were a few families who just said, no, we're not going to drive up to Dreaming Summit. No problem with the teacher, no problem with the school. We're just not going to make that drive every day. And so you lose a few in the process. And so you have to weigh, you know, part of our process over the next couple of months is actually going to be trying to survey potential preschool parents and having virtual open houses and things like that. And if we get good response, we'll do it. You know, whatever the demand is, if we can safely do it in a cost-effective way, we're going to do it. And so that's where we're going to go.
I also fear when we consolidate, often in an equitable, with an equitable lens, where we're often closing down the schools that are in the neighborhoods where we want the children to come. I mean, we want all of our children to come, but we want to give those resources. And when we consolidate and it goes farther away, oftentimes those families don't have the resources to get to those locations that are farther away. So that is always my concern when we talk consolidation as well.
Yeah, I understand.
Certainly for families living in poverty, the neighborhood school concept is ideal. Thank you, Megan, for that.
Okay, and last, I want to touch on something that Kim said also. I think the employee discount, we've always protected that pretty strongly because we felt like that was a really great benefit to give to our employees. And, you know, while we wish that we could just give them more money in their paycheck every day, we have to find creative ways to, you know, give them additional resources. I think we are nearing the point where we need to look at what that percentage amount is. I don't think we need to do away with it. I think there are benefits. There should be benefits to working here, that you can bring your kids to school, and we want to encourage them to do so. I think we need to look at what that percentage is, because I think ultimately what we're saying is we've kept that benefit so high. We keep, you know, because we said, you know, number one, it's just a staff benefit, which is great, but we keep raising tuition and we're offsetting it by making it cheaper for our employees, but then everyone else can't afford it. So it doesn't seem like that's, and now we're saying 25% of kids in this program are employees. We're reaching the point where that is in an imbalance, right? Of we can't have a quarter of our kids at a discounted rate. So, or at that high of discounted rate, I should say. So I would ask you to run some numbers on what that might look like at a different percentage rate and see what we can do to keep the employee discount, but just look at what it could be at a different level.
Will do. And just from a historical perspective, 20% comes from what's allowable by the tax regulations before they have to count it as a remuneration, as compensation.
Okay. Okay, so next steps. Oh, go ahead, Kim.
I have one more follow-up question, please. And this might be, I'm not sure if you know this information, Dr. Stair, or if Wendy would have this. The $1 million deficit that we're projecting for our current fiscal year, do we have holdover funds in community ed between preschool and extended day to cover that? Or will we be dipping into funds from a different segment to cover that deficit?
We do have the funds to cover that for the remainder of this year and even shortly into the next year. But again, like we said, we need to start in the black. It wouldn't make any sense to start off at a deficit next year and then hope for the best. And so, but we do have, you know, we had a building fund that had built up over several years. I feel really fortunate. And I'll say on a personal level, I have many friends in this business because I'm part of the Arizona Community Ed Association. And I've seen so many of them who didn't have a fund like that, and who didn't have a Wendy Qualls who established a fund like that. And so I'm very, very grateful that we haven't had to, wipe out jobs and send people home and send the whole program packing, which has happened in other districts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Agreed. Okay, thank you.
So next steps, kind of milestones moving forward. I know you have some aggressive timelines in terms of teacher contracts and next steps for parents enrolling in preschool and things like that. So from here, I know we've given you a lot of ideas and questions and things like that to take back, but in terms of next steps, I think what do you need from us, or what is the next step kind of for approving, knowing whether we're going to have what the increase, if any, is going to be to tuition and our teachers. I mean, I think, like you said, we kind of know where we are right now. It seems like we're all leaning towards that second option. I will say I'm hesitant. I mean, 11-2 doesn't seem like very much attrition. So I just want to make sure that with that 11-2 ratio, are we still starting in the black? Like, to me, that's the most important thing. We've got to figure out how to start in the black. And there was a couple different things, not just that we might be able to get there, but I think that's, as a follow-up, that's what I want to know. If you can find a way to get us in the black to start next year and still meet all of these criteria, yeah, I'm on board.
So we'll have that to include, not tomorrow, but in next week's Friday update. So you can begin considering that. And I appreciate the opportunity tonight for kind of a temperature check of where you're at, because now we know a little bit more where to focus our study and our efforts.
Awesome. All right, final comments, anyone? Okay, perfect. Thank you, Dr. Stair. I know this is, you never want to be the one who's coming to a meeting with $1 million+ deficit, but you handled that beautifully. So thank you very, very much. And I think all of these ideas are really well thought out. And I think we are, like we always try to do in Litchfield, striking a really solid balance between protecting our employees and the integrity of our program, but also being realistic and knowing that we have never been okay with operating in the red ever, which is why we have a fund that you can cover that $1 million loss. So I think it's important that we continue in that effort as well. So anyway, thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate it. And with that, we are wrapped up for the evening. So any other final comments or questions on the presentations that everyone has heard tonight? All right, well, great. Okay, well then I will open the floor for a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn, since you didn't steal my job instead.
I didn't, I left it. Second, thank you, Jeremy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are